I put out a video a little while back about bands who hated touring with Aerosmith, but it was obvious from reading the comments that I forgot to include a couple bands, including Canadian trio Rush, who had a bad time touring with Aerosmith in the 70s, and then there was also the band The Cult, who actually nobody mentioned in the comments, but a few people did mention the band Kansas. We're going to explore all those stories in today's video. In the 70s, Canadian trio Rush would open for Aerosmith. In recent years, Rush frontman Geddy Lee spoke about how horribly Rush was treated on that tour, with Rolling Stone magazine writing a profile on the band in 2015 and discussing the trek. They would write, and I quote, "Aerosmith were notably ungenerous to Rush in their opening act days, denying them sound checks and lowering their onstage volume. Most bands were afraid of Rush," says the band's longtime lighting director. "They were outplayed and they hated it." By the early 80s, Aerosmith were now struggling as their commercial fortunes had changed, and guitarist Joe Perry left the band, forming his new outfit, the Joe Perry Project. In a strange twist of fate, Joe Perry would end up opening for Rush during this time, with Lee revealing to Rolling Stone that he told the band's crew to treat the guitarist and his band well. Geddy Lee even made it a point to stop by Perry's dressing room during the tour and ask if he was being treated well, to which he responded yes. Lee would reportedly tell him, "Good, because I would never want anyone to feel the way we did when we opened for you." It was around the time of Rolling Stone publishing their 2015 story on Rush that Joe Perry responded to it, claiming that he had no recollection of touring with Rush or there being any bad blood between the bands. The magazine would quote the guitarist who said, "The competition between bands was stiff. The competition between crews even stiffer, so I doubt Geddy's word." Perry would go on to say that Aerosmith was, and I quote, "always given the short end of the stick when they opened for other acts, and that his bandmates have always told their crew to, and I quote, take care of our openers." However, he did recall hitting the road with Rush as a member of the Perry Project and added, "I want to thank them for treating the project so good and actually taking the time to ask if everything was okay. I hope I had the presence of mind back then to apologize. I want to congratulate Rush on their longevity because, like us, they're still around to tell the tales." The Cult would reunite in 1999 after taking nearly half a decade off. The reunited lineup, which included former Guns N' Roses drummer Matt Sorum, would sign a whopping $1 million deal with Atlantic Records, resulting in the band putting out their comeback album, 2001's Beyond Good and Evil. By the later part of the year, the band found themselves on the road opening for Aerosmith, but the wheels quickly came off. The Cult frontman Ian Astbury sabotaged the opportunity. The first show the band opened for Aerosmith was in Canada, and prior to hitting the stage, Aerosmith's then manager Jimmy Ayers warned the members of the Cult not to run up the huge ramps that went from the stage out into the audience that had an enormous hand at the end of it. According to Matt Sorum's recently released book, Double Talk and Jive, one song into the Cult's set, singer Ian Astbury ran all the way down the ramp up to the hand and immediately began jumping up and down on it. As the Cult finished their set, they headed back to the dressing room, where Aerosmith's manager came in and fired the band from the tour. Sorum told his bandmates and Aerosmith's manager to hold on before running over to Aerosmith's dressing room and having a word with frontman Steven Tyler. He would tell Tyler how Astbury, being English, didn't understand what a ramp was, and it was merely a miscommunication. Tyler gave the band one more chance. It was following the show Sorum remembered in his book, and I quote, "I was so sick of him," referring to Astbury. "Every time we had an opportunity to go big, he'd completely F it up. He was such a dark cloud always hanging over us. With every gig, he just got more and more sulky. These guys could sing, but they were their own downfall." As the tour wore on, the mood in the band only grew worse. Kansas drummer Phil Ehart would be interviewed by Louder Sound, where he talked about opening for Aerosmith in the 70s, saying, "We were and still are huge fans of Aerosmith, so it was a thrill to play with those guys. But we were warned to be careful. Steven would often pull the plug if a support act went down too well, and sure enough, that's what happened. But there's no bad blood as a result, and it gave us a very funny story to tell. It would turn out that Kansas's roadies were aware of how Steven Tyler would act and sabotage some opening acts, so they would end up running fake wires to their amps and hid the real ones, so Tyler only grew frustrated when he started to pull the wires out and noticed that nothing was happening." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.